We are now just 9 days away from the deadline for a framework deal with Iran over its nuclear program. As top U.S. officials sound optimistic, even excited about a deal, yesterday, Iran's supreme leader spoke to a large crowd about a deal with the United States. They chanted back, "Death to America." Still, CIA Director John Brennan says the U.S. has the ability to keep the pressure on Iran regardless of a deal. Doug McElway is here to unpack the latest. Doug?
Hi, Leland. As you well know, there are very different interpretations of how close the P5+1 negotiating countries are to reaching a deal. The top Russian negotiator, for example, along with Iran's atomic energy chief, said that in recent days that details were nearly completed. But French negotiators insist there is a great distance between the parties. And in London, where the P5+1 team is now meeting, Secretary Kerry, despite optimism that you cited, suggested significant obstacles remain. One of those obstacles, of course, is the U.S. Congress, which wants a say in the agreement. Senate Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Bob Corker is concerned that the U.S. and its partners are giving up valuable negotiating tools.
We keep moving from our initial position, the P5+1, towards Iran's position. And so there's a concern that the administration cares more about making a deal versus the right deal. I think you know that one of the things that brought Iran to the table were the congressionally mandated sanctions. Congress played a vital role in getting Iran to the table.
Speaking on Fox News Sunday, CIA Director John Brennan said that there are a number of things that the United States has available, presumably both overt and covert, to keep Iran from getting a bomb. But critics say Iran has continually cheated in the past. They ask, why should anything be different this time around?
I think we've gone to school on some of those developments over the last decade or so that we can now have a better plan and opportunity to verify some of the things that they are saying that they're going to do and not do.
And another threat from a powerful member of Congress, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, is threatening to pull UN funding if the administration bypasses Congress.
If they try to go to the UN Security Council and bypass us and leave us as the last guy standing, then there'll be a violent reaction against the United Nations. 22% of the funding for the United Nations comes from the American taxpayer, and I'm in charge of that account. I'm not going to allow the United Nations to be used as a way to get around the United States Congress for a deal that affects the very existence of Israel and our own national security.
And speaking on Fox News Sunday, Fox News just within the hour, former UN Ambassador John Bolton described the administration as naive for believing Iran will not cheat on the agreement. Leland?
Well, there is certainly not a lack of opinions on this matter. Doug McElway, we appreciate it. Thanks.
Our pleasure.
Uma?
Well, joining us now, the reaction and insights as the White House pushes for a nuke deal with Iran, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce. Welcome, sir. Great to have you again.
Good to be with you.
Have you been able to figure out why the administration is really trying to push for an Iranian nuclear deal timetable for March 31st, particularly at a time when we're hearing that France is expressing alarm that the West may be trying to undermine its own negotiating leverage by rushing to complete the deal, and France is raising red flags about giving in to the lifting of sanctions? What's your reaction to this?
Well, the zeal for the deal has been a problem from the beginning, and if you'll recall, in the last session of Congress, I and Congressman Eliot Engel had a bill that had passed 400 to 20 to put further sanctions on Iran and give the Ayatollah a choice between compromise on his nuclear program and economic collapse for his country. And the administration, although that bill had passed the House overwhelmingly, were able to hold that up in the Senate by convincing the Senate Democratic leader not to allow the bill to move. So from the beginning, we've been moving back from our positions. So the French are objecting at this point because, first, the sanctions would be lifted and over a very short period of time, maybe a 10-year period, Iran would no longer be under any pressure. And the second problem for them, I think, is the problem we have in Congress with the IAEA, the inspectors, telling us they have 1,000 pages of documents that Iran was working to develop a nuclear warhead and put it on an ICBM missile. And we want access to that information. We want to be able to verify this agreement. So we've backed up on everything else, ICBMs, The Ayatollah has said we're going to have massive ICBMs developed by Iran, and it's not in this agreement. Yeah. Enrichment, they're allowed to continue to enrich. But now this last point, if we're not even allowed to go in and get the evidence in terms of what they've developed on a nuclear weapon, then we really have capitulated in this negotiation.
Well, you know what's also really fueling critics who are very skeptical of any deal with Iran are the actions that are clearly divisive towards the U.S. Just one day after President Obama, for example, appealed to Iran to seize what he's calling, quote, a historic opportunity for a nuclear deal, and John Kerry saying substantial progress is being made, you have Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, calling for death to America. Here's how he phrased it, if we can put that up on the screen, when he addressed a crowd in Tehran yesterday. Of course, yes, death to America, but America is the original source of this pressure. They insist on putting pressure on our dear people's economy, a reference to Iran's big push to lift sanctions immediately. You know, it seems unreal this is happening while the White House says everything's on track for a deal.
Well, the White House is very naive on these subjects. For example, the White House pulled out the defense system in Poland and the Czech Republic that was meant as an intercept system to protect the United States and Europe from a launch from Iran. They did that in order to curry favor with the Russians, to push the reset button, as Hillary Clinton said, as Secretary of State at the time, push that reset button with the Russians. All they did was to make us more vulnerable, in my opinion. So at this point, it takes on a very real national security meaning if we allow Iran, while it's messaging death to America, death to the great Satan and the little Satan, to go forward and not have the verification on the agreement, to have this thing lifted after 10 years, such a short time frame. This is the other thing that Hollande, the head of state in France, is saying we should not be capitulating on. So it's interesting that the president is spending more time putting pressure on Hollande. I have a letter signed by 367 members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, siding with the positions that France is taking, saying don't give up these points in the negotiation that we just circulated last week and have sent to the White House. This is essential for our national security, in my opinion.
Well, we've been pointing out that the trust factor is a big one, because how can anyone really trust Iran to honor any deal? It's gone back on its word many times, and you were pointing out about the IAEA. The UN inspectors up to this point, for example, have been prevented from taking a close look at some of the sites in the Iranian mines that are suspect right now over the development of nuclear weapons there.
Can I give you an example of just how gullible the administration has been on this? So we're talking now about this subject of inspections. And in the middle of this negotiation some months ago, we caught Iran developing a new supersonic centrifuge that spins even faster so that their undetectable breakout capability would be ever quicker. And the decision, this is the way it was interpreted by the administration, basically, well, the negotiator on the Iranian side did not know that this was going on, so he did not really understand that this was a violation of the current agreement we have with Iran. Obviously his boss knew, right? The Ayatollah knew, because the Ayatollah is the supreme leader. That's their title, and it's not for nothing that he has that title. He has the ability to decide, and if he decides death to America, or if he decides to go forward with a nuclear program and we don't have verification on it, then we've got a big problem here in the United States. This is the message that the French are sending to the administration and that we as members of Congress are sending, and this is what has the Senate members concerned as well, who feel this should be a treaty, obviously, in which Congress has input, rather than the United Nations making the decision of lifting sanctions, sanctions that were put there by Congress in the first place.
With all this evidence that you're pointing out and putting out on the table right here, right, where's the pushback going to really come from? Do you see it's going to come from the Congress, the Senate right now, to say, whoa, before any deal is signed, we need to see it first?
It's coming from the House of Representatives, Foreign Affairs Committee, and our leadership. It's coming from the Senate, but it's also coming from the Prime Minister, or the Foreign Minister of France and the Head of State of France, who are all saying, enough. Let's get an agreement with something in it that guarantees the verification that we need here, and let's not have this thing elapse after 10 years and have Iran have undetectable breakout capability, where at that point They can arm all the ICBMs that the Supreme Leader has said he's going to put in place.
From what you know about the progress, is this something that you think is getting towards a deal you might be able to live with?
I don't think they'll reach a deal that we can live with because, as Henry Kissinger testified before our committee, we've gone from eliminating Iran's capability to develop a nuclear weapon to delaying it, and that, of course, is unacceptable to most of us. And I would imagine it may be enough to have enough votes in the United States Senate to not approve of it, and we will insist on approval and not going to the United Nations.
Well, let me ask you this. This week, I'm sure you know that President Obama himself sent a New Year's message to the Iranian people, which spoke a little bit about this pending deal. Let's take a look at it, and then I'll have you comment at the other side.
Weeks ahead will be critical. Our negotiations have made progress, but gaps remain. And there are people in both our countries and beyond who oppose a diplomatic resolution. My message to you, the people of Iran, is that together we have to speak up for the future we seek.
What do you think about that message? Was he referring to people like you when he said there are people who oppose a diplomatic resolution?
I'm sure he was, and I wish he had spoken to the people of Iran in 2009 when they rose up against a corrupt election and he refused to speak out on their behalf while they were chanting, Obama, Obama, are you with us or are you with them? Again, does he believe that anyone in Iran is able to speak up? Are they able to speak up for anything that the mullahs disagree with? They're either jailed or killed. I mean, again, this is a worldview the president has, which is totally divorced from reality.
Well, some could say that you and other senators were interfering in a way with the president's negotiations when you were one of 47 senators who signed the letter to Iran's leader saying that Congress needs to approve any deal that Iran enters into. Did you feel in any way, shape, or form before you signed on the dotted line, you've run for president yourself, that this was undermining the commander-in-chief before you even knew what he might be thinking of?
What triggered it, Gloria, was the president's announcement that no matter what Congress voted as far as ratification of this agreement, and clearly it's so important, it deserves the approval or disapproval of Congress, he immediately announced that he would veto any resolution from Congress. That's what triggered the letter and the events.
Should it have been written to the mullahs? Yeah.
Well, I think that the mullahs ought to know that Congress will play a role, and we will do everything in our power to make sure we do play a role because we think that's our constitutional obligations.
I mean, but you know, you criticize what Obama did with the video. I mean, isn't what you guys did the same thing as Obama did, talking to different segments in Iran to a degree?
Well, we were talking to the leaders who are hanging people every day who disagree with them, and he was supposedly speaking to people who have a voice in Iran, and they don't. And no human rights observer will tell you that they do.
ندارد که ایران فریاد بزند و فریادش به آسمان برسد که مرگ بر آمریکا